And after that there was the invasions with the parachutists coming down. I think it was in the morning, and instead of hearing lots of shots and guns and things, there was an absolute deathly silence. And during that silence, silent planes, they seemed to us, came across, but they were gliders. And out of them, of course, came the old story, the parachute. Kirk Bernand was attracted by Freiburg himself to arrange a concert party. Already there were two people in what was called the ANZAC, ENZA. They were going around entertaining, and these two people were already, they were to be picked for the concert party. Kirk Bernand knew of Wally Prichter in Dunedin, had been a soprano in his early years. He had an unusual high palate which made it possible for him to continue to keep his soprano voice. He had an unusual high palate which made it possible for him to continue to keep his soprano voice. Kirk Bernand himself had heard Snowy Wilson on the piano accordion. Saxophone, Dave Stafford, he had been playing beforehand. And in the 4th Field Regiment, before this, the 34th Anti-Tank from England, all these chaps were either studying the stage or something or other. Peter McIntyre was one of them. And they were in the 34th Anti-Tank Regiment. And Terry Vaughan, at times, because he was attached to the 4th Field Regiment, we sometimes would play shows for the troops, for our own crowd and so forth. So we became known as this. I myself was out in the desert, isn't it true? That was the Italian push, by the way, which resulted in more prisoners of war, I think, Italians, happy Italians, and there was more trucks and things picked up. It's diesel, isn't it? You have to warm up before you. I think these diesel trucks. Well, they got no end of the diesel trucks, and our drivers drove the prisoners happily back into our prisoner of war camps. Then we came back from. Oh, by the way, that was the first time I've ever heard in the desert. I heard Christmas Day in the Workhouse, and I've never heard anybody saying it for a long, long time. I'd like to get a copy of that. The chap recited it from the 4th Field Regiment. But we came back to Harrowaan. That's the place where what they call the Kaiser's Hospital was. I was in there for a while and had an ear perforation. And the local doctor from here, Dr. Ring, Calvin Ring, was in charge of that part of that kind of thing, ear, nose and throat then. And he became an eye doctor afterwards. And his son still carrying on here. But in Harrowaan, I was there in the camp there, we had a camp there. Notice came around on the notice board. What was they called it? Everyday orders or something, I've forgotten what they called them. They came out on the board and it stated about people applying for the concert party. So I, and perhaps others, applied. I happen to be a brother of, I happen to know the brother of Ivan Hanna, who was also singing in shows with me, who didn't apply for the concert party, but I met Ivan later, who sang merry songs, one of the top performers in that group. Anyway, it's hard to believe that carting a fiddle around all that time. There was another chap from Invercargill, where I come from, Jack Cardno, before he went to Crete, and in the 4th Field Regiment, we'd go to Cairo and just pop into a cafe and pick up their instruments, and they'd provide us with food and beer and so forth, and we'd meet the local people. It was very nice, that. But Jack, apparently, he became a gun sergeant, and he might have thought of coming into the concert party. He would have been marvellous. He was a professional musician. He was killed outright in Greece. That would be just before Crete. Now, applying for the concert party, I've forgotten whether you wrote down. Anyway, I went down to a tent and met this Kirk Baran, and dug out from my stuff that I hadn't played for years because there wouldn't be pianists to be able to play the accompaniment. I don't know how I carried the music around, but it seemed like that. Of course, your music would be popular if you could play at parties and Christmas time and all that kind of thing. Bagpipes, we had bagpipes, drummers, all kinds of things. It seemed to get on the boat. And the thing I played was an 8th, Royal College, 8th grade, a piece called D'Ambrosio. I used to announce it by saying D''A, and there's a little laugh. Anyway, that got me in. He took me straight away, so I was right for that part. The drummer had been a drummer. He'd been playing drums for different things and so forth. I wish I could think of his name straight away at the time. And played the xylophone as well, of course. We had 3 saxophones, and one of the chaps, by the way, is still alive, and he's down in Invercargill, very ill. That's Tom Heads. He was saxophone and trumpet. I can't remember exactly how he got in, but a lot of it was audition, a lot of it was because you were known. And it was like going into a place where you sort of respected the bloke in charge of you. He was like a friend. It was run well, but because you were learning from him. He was a well-experienced man. He'd been in charge of the Air Force bands and God knows what all, and musicals and things. And I'm talking about Tom Kirkman. And so it was like going into something that was, although the accommodation was just the same, it was at that stage. I'd gone from, when we first went to Egypt, we dug a hole, a big hole below the ground, and a tent put up on top of it. In this case, by this time, of course, it was 12 months or so after, they had huts and straw mattresses and so forth. So we're told, of course, some of these chaps now, of course, were first echelon people. They'd been around a bit, so any new blokes who had come over a bit late, they called them red asses and so forth. It wasn't just that kind of thing does happen, you know. But in other words, you weren't going to take, if a chap was a higher rank than you, and he was telling you what to do, you have to be careful how he spoke to you. For instance, an officer quite often, instead of saying, Pasco, do so-and-so, you must say, gonna Pasco. You mustn't say just... And another one was sound the trumpet, not blow the trumpet. So they could be, you could hold the person down and say you weren't given your proper instructions.
Otherwise you wouldn't do it.